I call the meeting to order of the April 6th meeting, Planning and Zoning Commission. Seated tonight are myself, David Rathbun, Ben Philbrook, Gardner Young, Ryan DC, who's filling in for Lynn Conway, and Chuck Sheehan, who's filling in for Fred until he gets here, Dykeman, if he gets here.
Fred just showed up.
Fred is here.
Okay, Fred, welcome. Fred's here, so he's always late.
Come on, David. Give me a break.
Oh, you're still in the bedroom. That's why.
Well, you know, construction is running behind. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll get back there probably next year or the year after.
All right, we'll call the meeting to order. Minutes of March 23rd meeting.
Make a motion to approve the minutes as entered.
Second.
Second. Any
Second.
discussion? Any discussion?
They look very good.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Keith, you're up.
That
Oh,
background
minutes
music
approved.
is a great
I think we're on
introduction
Jeopardy.
for me. Item 4D1, the administrative review items, 2173 ZON, GBD Realty LLC, zoning permit application for a 30-seat restaurant with a drive-through window in the formerly approved restaurant property located at 148 South Broad Street, Pawcatuck, Assessors Map 25, Block 1, Lot 14, Zone GC60. This application, it's really sort of a interpretation on behalf of the commission, and Attorney Ladwig's here to present this on behalf of the applicant, so I think I'll hand it over to him. And before we start, I should tell everyone, first of all, this meeting's being recorded, and second of all, if you're not speaking, if you can please mute your microphone so we don't hear the background noise. That's whether you're on a computer or a telephone. Thanks.
Ted? Go ahead.
Mr. Brines. Thank you, commission members. Just technical matter. The application which I filed is for a 30-seat restaurant with drive-through windows to it, which is a fairly important distinction to make here. Not a single window, but 2 windows. And I submitted a memorandum of law with my application, which I'm going to summarize very briefly. Section 8-2 of the Connecticut General Statutes says that the regulations, the town regulations, shall not provide for termination of a non-conforming use without regard to the intent of the owner to maintain that use. And abandon the cases cited, and I would emphasize that the staff report agrees with me on this, that the cases in Connecticut show that the abandonment must be voluntary and, most importantly, permanent. You have a letter attached to this application from the owner of the property, Bruce Thomas, that indicates that in spite of the 2 tenants which have intervened in this property since he purchased it in 2011, because of a lease which had not expired in Mystic. These were short-term leases to fill in the gap between purchasing the property and taking over permanently at that location. That the modifications done by those tenants were not intended to be permanent. I think the most telling evidence of that are the 20 photographs which I submitted with this application. And I want to just very briefly go through those 20 photographs with you. You have them in the application. I don't know whether you got them in color or not. I went to some trouble to get them in color. They're really pretty in color. The first 2 show the entrance to the site and most tellingly, the entrance to the queuing lane, with the signage showing the entrance and the showing the entrance to the queuing lane, which isn't completed. The second two photographs show the queuing lane, and I've been doing drive-in windows for 35 years, and I've never seen a better stacking queuing lane than this one. 14 cars can come off of Route 1 and queue up for the drive-in windows at this location. That is remarkable. Photographs 3 and 4 show the covered area for the menu board and ordering from the drive-in windows. It shows that the covering is there and the evidence of the intent to continue the drive-in use, because while the menu board was removed to prevent vandalism, the electrical connections were not removed. Photographs 4 and 5, actually photographs 4 show the covering of the pay window, which remains intact under a covered porte cochere, and then kind of the bugger in the discussion here is that temporary closure of the fencing window, also under a porte cochere. My take on this, you can see the plywood covering of where the takeout window used to be. That takeout window was removed to put in a roll-up garage to roll in spas. One argument would be, not only did we not remove the drive-in, we included a larger drive-in for the installation of the spas through a roll-up garage rather than a window. And the proposal is now to reinstall the window to dispense the pastries. Paragraphs 6 through 9 show the outside facade of the building and the parking lot with more than ample parking for the 30-seat restaurant and the signage. And finally, showing the screening from the neighboring locations and the final photographs. I also included 2 letters, one from the president of the Pawcatuck Little League and one from the assistant principal of the Stonington High School, thanking the owners of this site for their support of local sports teams and the Stonington High School graduation ceremonies this spring. I also received a letter this afternoon at 4:30 after the town hall was closed from Greg Howard, the representative of our district in Hartford, which I would like, because he took the time to do the letter, I would like to read it into the record. Chairman Rathbun and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, I'm happy to write to you in support of the Thomas Serper Group, which is how he recognizes the owners of this property, regarding property on South Broad Street. It is my understanding that there is no objection from local officials or neighbors. As you know, the location was previously a coffee and donut shop with a drive-through. Having this location reestablished as a coffee shop will benefit the area, as the building and property have been eyesore as a vacant property. In addition, this location will serve as a convenience for the local residents, many of whom start their day with a coffee. In my capacity as an organizer for a Play for Free youth sports organization, I can assure you that the Thomas Serper Group is a community supporter and supported Stonington youth football as well as other local programs. We are all fortunate to live in a community where residents, business organizations, and government continue to work collaboratively for the best interest of our town and those who live here. Thank you for considering my opinion, and I look forward to grabbing my morning coffee at this newly cleaned up location. I submitted these 3 letters, 2 from, 2 with the application and Representative Howard's letter tonight for 2 reasons. One is to demonstrate that the owners of this property, the operators of this location are good corporate citizens. They have supported our local efforts, sports teams, and the Stonington High School seniors. The second reason I submitted these letters is because you get support from business like this if they're successful. If they go out of business, if they fail because of either the location or because they lack the appropriate infrastructure to properly service their customers, they do not have the ability to contribute to the local sports teams, Stonington High School, seniors, and other worthwhile efforts. You get that kind of support from well-meaning corporate citizens who have the success to be able to support our local efforts. You get a twofer here.
Do the members of the commission have any questions at this time? Thank
I
you.
have, Mr. Chairman, I have one other point that I would like to make. It's a safety issue. To have a drive-through at a pastry shop is not merely a convenience, it's a safety issue. Particularly in this day and age of COVID, which we hope will pass into the dark history, we're not going to have to deal with that. But going up and you not getting out of your car, not going into the shop is a safety issue in the immediate future. But I had the occasion to talk with a young mother, a mother of young children, when I was trying for a drive-through at a different location. And she said to me, mothers with young children love drive-throughs. It's a safety issue. Imagine if you drive up to the pastry shop with your 2 kids in their 2 car seats. To go into the shop, you've got to get 2 kids out of their car seats, into the parking lot, drag them across the parking lot, into the pastry shop, get your pastry, go back to your car with the kids in tow and your pastries under your arm, and get them back into the car and strapped into their car seats. All of which is eliminated if you can drive up to the window, stay in your car, keep the kids in their car seats, and drive home with your pastries.
Thank you,
It's a
Ted.
safety issue. I said to myself at that time when I had that conversation, it's rare that I'm on the side of motherhood. And I'm delighted to have that conversation with that woman, to be on the side of motherhood, young children, and safety. I would
Thank you.
ask you to recognize the long history of this site as a donut shop. It was Penny's Donuts before it was Best Eaten. We hope to have a donut shop, a pastry shop again, with a drive-in window to allow people to drive up, order their pastries, pay for their pastries, and get their pastries through the delivery window and drive home safely with their pastries.
Thank you.
Thank you for your attention.
Any questions from members of the commission?
Yes,
Ben?
yes, Mr. Chair. Speaking of safety, Ted, on the 2 curb cuts on the easternmost one, I didn't notice in your photographs, is there a sign saying no left turn?
I'm glad you brought that up. I don't see the sign, Mr. Philbrook. However,
I'd like a big one up there.
what was important, as much as the sign, was the design of it. And if you
Right.
take a look at that, because I took the photograph to show it.
Well, I looked at the plans and I see that the driveway is pushing you east up the hill. I just don't want anybody turning left with that little rise right there. It's so dangerous, somebody whizzing around that corner.
Nobody
Heading
wants
west.
people turning left. Everybody wants people, as a matter of fact, you know what, that photograph didn't get in my submission. But the way of the design, if you look at the site plan that I submitted, what you'll see that the curb curves to the east. So if you're coming out of that pickup window, you are funneled to the east. It's a very, very difficult, I hesitate to say impossible, but it's a very difficult turn to the west on purpose, obviously because of that
Right.
that slight rise coming from the east to west. I agree that a sign should be posted there, but I want to assure you that matter was considered. I was representing Bess Eaton at the time this was permitted, 20 years ago, and that point was very well, made, and we designed the site so that the turn, you would turn coming out of the pickup window, left through the parking lot, and exit the parking lot where you
Right.
entered, where the sight lines are much better. I don't fault the posting of a sign as well.
No, people are more impatient than they were 20 years ago, so I'd like to see a sign up there. That'd be great.
Sign would be
Please.
altogether appropriate.
Great, thank you, sir. That's it for me.
Any other questions? What does the commission like to decide on this? Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve with proper signage, no left turn.
I second.
No left
Hear a
turn.
second?
I second.
Any discussion? All
Yes,
those in
yes.
favor?
Wait.
Wait a minute, Fred.
I'm sorry, I couldn't figure out how to unmute myself. The thing that troubles me about this is that the present owner of this property has owned this for a decade, has had 2 tenants over that period of time at least who have not had use for a drive-through. And I'm a little troubled by the fact that we're asked now to believe that the drive-through feature, which is now not allowed in this zone, is not abandoned. It's not like the present owner didn't have a couple of opportunities to make the point that he was not abandoning the drive-through. And I know that stretch of road pretty well, and one more group of people driving out there is the last thing we need. I'm not sure how long we allow people to not take advantage of a pre-existing condition and still utilize it a decade later. The whole thing troubles me, frankly. Why should we?
Can I respond to that, Mr. Dyckman? Can I respond to that?
Sure.
The state statutes, which were amended as recently as 2017, speak to that. And prior to 2017, they said mere non-user does not constitute abandonment. In other words, not using it for 5 years, 9 years, 10 years does not constitute abandonment. The language in the statute was strengthened in 2017. It further said that even the destruction or demolition of the non-conforming use would not constitute abandonment. But mere non-user has for as long as I've been practicing law, it does not constitute abandonment of that use. And furthermore, if you look at Mr. Thomas's letter, when he was leasing the property, he contacted the then director of planning, Jason Vincent, and said, how do I make sure that I don't abandon this use? And Jason's advice to him was, keep the first window. Keep the first window as evidence that you do not intend to abandon the drive-through use of this property. My argument tonight is that the covering of the delivery window clearly indicates to me that that was a temporary fix, a temporary measure to, but not an abandonment of either of those 2 windows. But the basic black letter law of Connecticut is regardless of the length of time, mere non-user does not constitute abandonment.
Okay, I would ask you then, as a lawyer, what does constitute abandonment?
If you knock the property down and put up an apartment building, if you abandon the use of this property as a restaurant, pastry shop, donut shop, if you put up a car lot, if you put up an apartment building or an office building, you have demonstrated that this is no longer to be used, as a donut shop, pastry shop, drive-in feature. That's the reason I submitted the photographs. The queuing lanes are still there. The ordering kiosk is still there. Everything to support the drive-in feature is still there. It has not been plowed under. It's not been paved over. It has not been abandoned.
So the interim uses, one of them was a spa, I believe, did not constitute a change of use that would indicate an abandonment?
No, no, because that window, that pay window was still there.
Oh, okay.
And again, the window that was removed was actually substituted for a roll-up garage door. So if I have to, I will make the argument that we are now retreating from a garage door to a window. That's less intrusive. The window is less intrusive or less obnoxious than a garage door.
This is Keith Rines. So I do have to point out just that Jason Vincent didn't work for the town from between 2007 and 2016. Not saying that, to be against the commission's interpretation one way or the other, but, Jason didn't work here during that time.
Any other questions? So what is the feeling on this application?
Are we to vote?
Yeah,
I
There
made a
is a-
motion to approve.
it has a second. Has anyone seconded it?
I'll second.
Any more discussion? I'll take, Ben, approve or disapprove?
Approve?
Gardner,
Approve.
Fred,
Disapprove.
Ryan,
Approve.
motion's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, commission members. I appreciate it very much. I hope you enjoy your coffee and donuts.
Thank you, Ted. Ben,
Okay, moving on to the public hearing. Notice of virtual public hearing pursuant to the general statutes of the state of Connecticut, revision of 1958 and all amendments thereto, and pursuant to the zoning regulations for the town of Stonington, Connecticut, the Planning and Zoning Commission hereby gives notice that it will hold a virtual public hearing using WebEx on Tuesday, April 6, 2021, 7 p.m. on the following application. PZ 2101 SPA and CAM, Whalers Inn RE LLC, William Sweeney. Site plan and coastal area management review applications for the construction of 15 paved parking spaces adjacent to and serving the retail and residential uses at 11 Cottrell Street. The project entails merging the 11 Cottrell Street property with the vacant lot at 1 through 3 Haley Street. Properties located at 11 Cottrell Street and 1 and number 3 Haley Street, Mystic. Assessors map 182, block 4, lots 4 and 4A, zones DB5 and RH10.
The way the public hearing will work is we'll hear from the applicant first and all those in favor of the application. Then we'll hear from anyone opposed to the application. And then we'll have anyone on general comments on the application. And after that, we'll have the applicant will have the right for rebuttal. And in the end, the staff will comment on the application. Seated tonight in the public hearing is myself, David Rathman, Ben Philbrook, Fred Dykeman, Gardner Young, and Ryan Deasy. Is Mr. Sweeney on?
I am, sir. I'm ready.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members of the commission. For the record tonight, my name is Bill Sweeney. I'm a partner and a land use attorney with the law firm of Tobin Carberry in New London, Connecticut. And I certainly appreciate the opportunity to appear before you again this evening. I represent Whalers Inn RE LLC, which is a Connecticut limited liability company and a real estate holding company in Mystic, Connecticut, which is controlled by the Heidenreich family. My client, as you know, has submitted a site plan application with a coastal site plan review to the commission to permit the construction of 15 paved parking spaces located adjacent to and serving the former Oddfellows building located 11 Cottrell Street in Mystic. Joining me tonight on the call is Amanda Arling. She's a representative of my client, as well as Norm Tebow, the project engineer with Killingly Engineering Associates. Before I begin, I do want to take a moment and remind the commission that tonight, while this is a formal public hearing and it was called at your option, which is your right under the general statutes, the application before you is not a special permit, it's not a master plan, it's not a zoning change. It is simply a site plan application with a CAM review, and that's governed under sections 8.3.2 and 7.3.1 of your regulations. I tell you that because there's no weighing of impacts, there's no performance standards, there's no qualitative consideration of special permit criteria to be had here. If this application meets your site plan requirements, you're required to approve it as a matter of law. And this is very different than most applications you review in public hearings. But the general statutes at section 8-3G1 make crystal clear that a site plan may be modified or denied only if it fails to comply with requirements set forth in your zoning regulations. I'm going to start with just showing, if I can share my screen. Keith, am I authorized to do that?
Yes, you can just go ahead.
Bear with me. Can everybody see that screen okay?
Yes.
Yes.
The site plan that we're going to show you tonight is centered around 11 Cottrell Street and 1 and 3 Haley Street. And the site plan we're going to show you meets or exceeds all the bulk, dimensional, and other requirements of your zoning regulations. And therefore, as I just mentioned, has to be approved by this commission. I would like to provide you some basic background on the application, though, and walk you through what is a very straightforward site plan, and then before turning it over to the public and then any questions the commission may have. Our client purchased the Oddfellows building, and I'm going to just show my cursor on the screen to point out the Oddfellows building at 11 Cottrell Street. Our client purchased the Oddfellows building last year after a protracted negotiation with the former owner. As many of you know that are familiar with Mystic, the Oddfellows building is a historic building. It's located in the DB5 zoning district, and it's currently used for approximately 2,600 square feet of retail space and service shops on its ground floor, and it has 4 residential apartments on its upper floors. Now, this current tenant configuration, this mixed use sort of use of the building, would require at least 17 off-site parking spaces under your current zoning requirements. Historically, the Oddfellows building has never had any significant off-street parking associated with it. And in fact, the last approval granted by this commission back in 2007 only designated 5 parking space in a narrow driveway at the rear of the property. And I'm just showing you on the screen that driveway. A good portion of that driveway was actually on 1 and 3 Haley Street, that parcel, by way of an easement between the 2 property owners. Now, this arrangement of this deficiency of off-street parking is a legally pre-existing non-conforming issue. And in fact, today, it remains legally non-conforming, and it's at least less non-conforming than when the building was used for assembly uses prior to 2007. The bigger issue, though, tonight, and why we're here before you, is that there's a lack of available off-street parking in downtown Mystic in a general sense. And that lack of parking undermines the long-term economic viability of existing uses like the Oddfellows building, as well as new development that may be directed into this area. This lack of off-street parking contributes to on-street parking congestion in both the commercial and residential areas of Mystic, and it frustrates business owners and residents alike. My client has heard from numerous residents and town officials and tenants that in Mystic, especially businesses, need to do more to alleviate parking congestion. And this application that we've put before you tonight is intended to address that need in what we believe is a responsible and responsive way, but at the same time, make the Oddfellows building more viable for both its current and future residents, employees, and customers. So I'm going to just try to share another plan with you, the site plan. Hold on for just a second. Let me see if I can get this. Just want to turn this to here. Can everybody see that okay on the screen? Yes?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, so this is the site plan that we submitted for the application. It's been revised based on comments from town agencies and departmental review. The project before you entails the merger of the parcel at 11 Cottrell Street that includes the Oddfellows building with the vacant lot behind the building that is known as 1 to 3 Haley Street. This property here is zoned RH10. It was the site of 2 homes that were removed several years ago from the property. And this vacant space will now be used to accommodate parking dedicated for the Oddfellows building. It's important to note, and you can see in this sort of light gray dotted line that runs like this through the plan, that these 2 parcels at right now span the zoning boundary line between the DB5 and the RH10. But when we merge these parcels, which is what we're proposing as part of this project, this will become what is known as a split parcel, or a parcel divided by district boundary. And you have special regulations that regulate the use and development of these divided properties. And that's what this property would become. We're proposing less than 20 parking spaces. In fact, our initial application was for 15 spaces. Right now, we're only showing 14, and I'll explain in a couple minutes why that is. But we're proposing to construct less than 20 new parking spaces, which will serve the principal uses that will be on this new unified lot. And that, under the RH10 regulations, is a permitted accessory use subject to site plan approval. And your staff report from your town planner confirms that interpretation of the regulations, and that we're permitted to build this parking lot that serves this building in this location. As I noted previously, this project does not require a special use permit, but just a straightforward site plan that meets your zoning requirements. Now, on our site plan, we've included several pages. I'm going to just go to a couple different sections. It's right here. Bear with me. As you'll notice on our plans, this is sheet 3 of the site plan. We are proposing subsurface infiltration system on the property to deal with stormwater off the new parking lot. This underground storage system has been equipped with an isolator row to make sure that things like solids and particulates are taken out of line before that water infiltrates back into the groundwater table. This infiltration system has been reviewed and approved by the town engineer based on the drainage calculations our project engineer has submitted. As I also mentioned previously, there is a CAM, or a coastal area management review, as an ancillary approval to this site plan. And this is obviously not waterfront property, but portions of the Oddfellows building, and I'll go back to the main site plan, are within the CAM zone. Just going to scroll up. Bear with me for a second. And you should be able to see this blue line right here on the property, on the survey. Obviously, we're not doing anything within that blue line, but the way the CAM statute works is that if any portion of the property touches the CAM zone, even if you're not working in it, you are required to do a CAM review. So we're outside the CAM area to the Mystic River, but we have submitted a CAM application. And because we submitted a CAM application, our application was forwarded to the Connecticut DEP for review and comment. And the Connecticut DEP reviewed it, and based on our infiltration design for our stormwater system, which I just showed you, the DEP agreed that there would be no adverse impact to nearby coastal resources. On the site plan, you'll also see these sort of dark circles that look like little suns. They are scattered around the parking lot area. And you can see there's these sort of kidney shape extent of lighting distribution is how they're labeled. For lighting for the parking lot, we're trying to be very cognizant of nearby neighbors and to try to fit something into the site that is consistent and compatible with the neighborhood. So we're proposing, and I'm just going to scroll down again. You can see here sorry. You can see here we're proposing a bollard type lighting. These bollards are only 42 inches tall. They have an optical unit in them which can direct light downwards. We're not putting in tall street lights in the parking lot. We want to keep low intensity, low height lights simply to illuminate the parking lot for minimum safety and security needs during evening hours. So again, the intention is not to light up the parking lot, and you can see the limits of that illumination shown on our site plan. We're also providing for significant landscaping. We have a separate sheet. This is the landscaping plan for the project. This is Haley Street. The Oddfellows is over here. We are required by your regulations to maintain a 25-foot landscape buffer to adjacent residential properties. We've provided that adjacent on the eastern side of the property to the Santos property. This is the 25-foot strip. We've also provided that along Haley Street for our neighbors across Haley Street. Our privacy, our screening consists of a substantial planting plan that includes trees, conifers, ornamentals, shrubs, grasses, perennials, and most importantly, a privacy fence running through the middle of it as well to block out any kind of potential noise or glare or anything else that may bother or create an issue for our neighbors. And that was very important for our design. If I go back to the site plan, we have a detail for that privacy fence as well that we'll be installing along Haley and along our eastern property line. Now, as I said before, this is a site plan application that's gone to public hearing. And because it was sent to public hearing, this site plan has gone through a much more extensive review than what is typical for a site plan. And it's been carefully vetted by a variety of your agencies and departments, which I think if you've read Mr. Bryant's staff report is fairly obvious. The town engineer reviewed our plans. He asked us to put some additional notes on our infiltration system. He also asked us to move it toward the center of the property, which we did. We also included inspection schedules. It's our responsibility to maintain that. That's not a town responsibility. As a property owner, we have to maintain those systems on a periodic basis. We added soil data to the plan to prove that the soils are suitable for infiltration. We clarified the limits of paving. We provided additional information on grades, confirmed our compliance with the town's technical standards. We revised some handicap ramps that we were proposing. We added bollards around some underground propane tanks that we have sort of here in the northwest corner of the property. We increased parking aisle widths throughout this parking lot. There are two entrances. Haley Street, as you know, is a one-way street. Cars would enter here and then exit here. This is the existing driveway curb cut for that little driveway behind Oddfellows that exists right now. And we also decreased the width of the driveway throat per the town engineer's comments. Mr. Brines, the town planner, also reviewed the plans. We provided a detailed landscaping plan, which I just showed you, prepared by Kenton Frost, who's a licensed landscape architect. We also supplemented that landscaping, particularly along Haley Street on the outside of the proposed fence, which you can see on the site plan here. We clarified vegetation that would be removed. We added additional E&S details. We added directional signage. Again, we increased our aisle width. There is an existing alleyway that leads out to Cottrell Street. We have designated that as emergency access only, and that will be properly signed. This is not a travel route for anything but emergency vehicles after this project is approved. We clarified our circulation pattern, and then working with the building official, we widened our handicap space to make sure that our handicap space on the site was accessible for van ADA parking. That widening actually took away a parking space. So I said before, we applied for 15 parking spaces. We only have 14 shown on the plan because the van accessible parking took away a space. So what we're showing in the revised plan tonight is one less than what we asked for. The project was also, it wouldn't typically be referred to, but it was referred to the police commission. The police commission concurred with with the decision to close off this alleyway except for emergency use. But more importantly, the commission voted not just to submit comments on our application, but also to actively support our application, which is fairly unusual in my experience with the police commission. And I think that was, if you happened to listen to that virtual meeting with the police commission, the commission as a whole, there was consensus that there is a desperate need for new off-street parking in downtown Mystic, and that's important for the community's long-term success. Finally, there were some neighbor comments as well that I just want to quickly address. Jim Santos, I know he's on the call tonight. Jim and his wife are neighbors of ours to the east of the property. They had provided some initial comments on the plan, and we actually addressed a lot of them. There were two items that were not addressed on this revised plan, specifically regarding curbing and how we dealt with the fence along his property line. Mr. Santos has been a really good neighbor throughout for a number of years now, and we certainly want to try to work with him. What he asked for is to put a strip of curbing along the eastern edge of this parking lot. I think with the intention of trying to prevent any flow of water in that direction. We're happy to do that as long as the town engineer it signs off on it. The reason we didn't show it is because the entire parking lot is graded to flow toward Haley Street and to this catch basin system here. So we can put that curbing there, but just gravity is going to push water in this direction, not in this direction. But if it's something that would make Mr. Santos feel a little better, we're happy to do that. And again, as long as the town engineer agrees. I'm going to go back to just the landscaping plan for a second. I'm sorry because this one is in the other direction, but this is Mr. Santos's property here, and this is the proposed landscaping along his property line. We're proposing the 6-foot privacy fence along the property line, then a row of the giant arborvitaes behind it, then with junipers as well. There is existing vegetation along this property line right now, and based on a letter that I saw from Mr. Santos this week, that I think he wrote to either the commission or Keith, he asked that we try to keep the existing vegetation and perhaps move the fence back. Again, you know, that is something that's possible. And I'm getting a little feedback. I'm sorry. So one of the things we can do is we can move that fence back. If you look at some of the pictures Mr. Santos submitted, however, some of those plantings and trees and shrubs are not in the best of health. Some we think may even be dead. So we're happy to work with staff to see what we can do to preserve what is good landscaping in this area, and we can move the fence back as long as we don't move it so far back that we lose snow storage area. But again, we want to try to work with Mr. Santos in a collective and cooperative way. I also understand, I also got this afternoon comments from Mr. Shear, who lives across Haley Street, who's in opposition of the plan. Mr. Shear suggests that these types of parking lots are not permitted in the RH10 zone. That's simply not the case, and that's an improper reading of the regulation. And Mr. Brines, in his staff review, confirms that this type of a layout is absolutely conforming to your zoning regulations, which is really the only question before you tonight, reviewing a site plan application. I know Mr. Shear also mentioned in his letter some problems he has with the hotel to the north. Again, that's not relevant to the application at hand, but certainly I can speak to hotel management as I represent that entity as well. And we're always happy to try to work with neighbors if there's an issue that he's concerned with. And finally, in terms of Mr. Shear's letter to the commission, we would dispute the suggestion that this project has any discernible negative impact to the property. But even if it did, I want to remind the commission again, this is not a special permit application. There is no weighing of impacts. Issues regarding neighborhood character, those are things for a special permit application, not a site plan. You've already, through the adoption of your regulations, indicated to property owners, developers, residents that this type of use is permitted in this type of a configuration. So again, I have reviewed the staff report for tonight's meeting. I have no comments on any of Mr. Bryan's suggested conditions of approval. I think they're fair and reasonable. And so actually stipulations to approval as if it's a site plan, not a special permit. And so again, I don't have any comments at this time on those conditions. I want to thank you for your time and attention this evening. Mr. Thibault is available if you have any specific questions on engineering, but I can also try to answer them as well. So that's it for me. I reserve the right to follow. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions from the board at this time?
Yeah, I have one question. Who is going to be using this parking lot? Is it going to be strictly for Whalers Inn? Is it going to be restricted, or if I'm going there to go shopping and I pull in, park, go shopping, and leave? I mean, who's going to be using this parking lot?
Great question. So this is not affiliated with the Whalers Inn. It's Whalers Inn RE, which is again a land holding company, but it's not affiliated with the hotel to the north. Again, our map is turned upside down. So there are 4 residential units in the upper floors of the Oddfellows building. So those people will get designated spaces in this parking lot. And then the rest of the parking spaces are designated for employees and customers of the retail spaces in the bottom floor of 11 Cottrell Street. That is our intent with this application. That's how it has to be based on our application. And that's how, that's what our proposal is. As I said before, the current layout requires 17 off-site parking spaces if you built this building today. It has 5 per its 2007 approval. I would tell you that it's very hard to find 5 conforming spaces in that narrow driveway behind the building right now. We're not even getting to the 17, we're getting to 14. So we're making the situation better, and we're getting parking off the street, which I think is what we hear from the community they want to see. So again, it's a small step. It's not a panacea. It's not the silver bullet that's going to fix parking in downtown Mystic, but I think it's the responsible way as a business owner who has just purchased this building and wants to make it economically viable now and in the future, to have some supportive parking for it. So I hope that answers your question, Mr. Gardner.
Pretty much. It's just that I guess my question is, so the tenants in the apartments will have designated spaces, and then there'll be spaces for the retail. I mean, I'm just saying, like, if I'm going shopping, can I pull in there and grab one of those spaces or not? I mean, is there going to be signage that says private parking, or how's it going to be designated?
Yeah, I think Gardner, to your question, I think that's what my question was going to be. Is there will there be signs stating, okay, this parking is only for residents and or patrons of the shops? How is that going to be managed? Because even today I walk by there and you see tourists driving by and they're looking for any place to park.
Sure.
Right. So obviously you want to have that control.
We have to police our parking, just like quite frankly, if you think about it, any commercial business that has off-street parking, particularly more than 1 or 2 spaces, has to police their parking for their users. So yeah, I expect that we will develop some type of a signage program for this. Right now, our uses in the lower part of the building, I was just talking with the ownership group earlier today. So we've got a salon, we've got a couple retail shops. They are open from basically 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. or 8 p.m. So during the day, this is going to be used by the users in this building. At night, the residents will obviously be the primary users. If somebody, in reality, if somebody at 10 o'clock at night, after the retail is closed down in this building, pulls in because they intend to, walk up the street and go to Bravo, that's the kind of stuff that sometimes happens in downtown Mystic. But it is our intention, and it is the purpose that we have put in our application, that this parking is dedicated for this use, and that's our intent. And we'll work on policing that, and we're going to have to just to manage that private lot.
Ben, you have a question?
Yes, good evening, Attorney Sweeney. I have numerous questions, as you might suppose. How about putting in a gate like they do for Steamboat Wharf, that you'd have to have a swipe pass as an occupant of Oddfellows Club to lift the gate to enter the parking lot?
Well, again, that might work for residents, but the parking is also for customers of our business. So we really would rather not do a gate.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's the primary issue. And, realistically, when you have mixed uses, and this is a mixed use building, we will dedicate residential spots in that parking lot. But residential spots are typically not occupied in the non-COVID world during the day. And so when you have sort of mixed use projects, there's a great synergy there where at night the lot becomes available for not just residents, but maybe their guests. Somebody's having a dinner party over at one of their units. There's some very nice units in this building. And in the day, those same spaces can be used for the retail use and for customers, somebody who's coming to get their hair done. So I think that's my answer to that question.
Okay, I have I walked around the building the other day and there's 10 electrical meters and 10 gas meters. Are there 6 commercial spaces on the first floor? Streets?
No. Amanda, if Amanda Arling could, if you can answer, Amanda, just give your name for the record and just if you could just talk just briefly about the number of commercial tenants, and then if I think I have the explanation to the number of meters, but go ahead.
Absolutely. So I'm Amanda Arling, president of the Whalers Inn. So I mean, that property is a historic building. It's gone through a number of iterations and transformations over the year. I think what you're referencing is that certain units used to be two separate units that were since combined, and they're also meters for common areas and storage areas at this point in time. So
I was just going by the meters on the wall.
Yep. Some of them are inactive. Some of them are no longer being used. Some of them are for common areas, and some of them are for undeveloped vacant areas at this point in time. But there are 3 residential units on the ground floor, 2 apartments on the first floor, and 2 apartments on the third floor.
Great, thank you. And another question is parking. I don't understand why. Would it make more sense to have the parking spaces diagonal, slightly angled, rather than all 90 degrees?
Yeah, I can answer that. So,
and I did a little sketching, and you would chew into the buffer slightly towards the street, but you wouldn't interrupt your buffer to the east to the Santoses.
One of the issues is if you look at the design guidelines, when you make spaces diagonal, there are not equal changes to the aisle widths. The design is based not just on the directionality of the spaces, but also the aisle widths. And we did look at that. In fact, that was something that we ran a couple different scenarios with, but it was essential for us. Although I think there's arguments that we could provide a less than 25-foot buffer, I thought it was the right thing to do to sort of hold that as sacrosanct along Haley Street and along the Santos property. So at the end of the day, to have the circulation through the site, we didn't gain anything by making them diagonal. And it was something we looked at, but it was just at the end of the day, there was no gain. And in fact, it constrained our access around this point. And we're sort of constrained over here anyways, because of the propane tanks that are already installed underground in this location.
And is that 11-foot width on your emergency, could an ambulance fit? An ambulance must be 8 feet wide, right?
Yeah, so
that's tight, isn't it?
It's very tight, but it is pre-existing. So that's not something that's proposed. There is an alleyway, and in fact, up on Cottrell Street, there's actually, you can see this is crossed out, this space. That's how it's actually painted on Cottrell Street. So, yeah, so there is no ability to widen this. This is effectively the limit.
So what kind of emergency, what kind of emergency vehicle would fit in there, do you think?
Not a fire truck. A fire truck would have to come in one of these entrances, but perhaps an ambulance. Like I said, it's a pre-existing condition. The police commission was concerned about was, now that there's more than just a couple cars parking behind here, people start to use this as a cut through, and they didn't want that, and we don't want that either. So we're keeping it for emergency access, also to maintain this side of the building. We're not talking about huge distances here.
Okay, great. I think that's most of my questions for the time being. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Right.
I have a couple. It goes back several years, but there was a great deal of controversy when the homes that were on this property on Haley Street were torn down without what was a traditional 90-day notice to the neighbors and so forth and so on. And I think John's, which is now 9 Cottrell Street, was torn down at the same time. I seem to recall a promise from the neighbors, the Whalers Inn, at that time, that this property was not going to be used for parking. Now, all of a sudden, we have Whalers Inn RE LLC, which is not the Whalers Inn, and a proposal for parking. And I wonder whether or not it is allowed by the regulations if the Whalers Inn isn't going back on their promise here.
There was Mr. Dykeman, there was no such promise made of any sort. I was retained by the both the Whalers Inn and the holding company at that time, and such a promise was never made whatsoever to the neighbors. There was a realization that the property was in the RH10 zone, and that has limitations. For example, under the current regulations, you could not build a hotel on this property. You can build an accessory parking lot serving a building on the same property in this unified configuration. So there may have been a recognition on that point, just because that's what the zoning allowed. But I can tell you definitively that was never a promise made by anybody involved in the Whalers Inn or the Heidenreich family. And so if that is your understanding, it's all I can say is it's incorrect, and it certainly didn't come from my client or any of their affiliated groups.
Okay.
Bill,
Yes.
I notice there's no planting on the north side of the lot. And I think if you put some good-sized deciduous trees there, you would take care of the glow and the lights from the inn to the neighborhood along that north line. You've got all the planting in the front, but nothing in the back of the lot. There's
Right.
no landscaping whatsoever there. Isn't there room to put some type of a good-sized 2 or 3 trees so it would get big, and the Whalers Inn, you would not see that back parking lot?
There is limited space there between the two paved surfaces. Could a tree or two maybe be placed in that area? It's something we could look at. I would note that it's absolutely not required by your
I
zoning
know that. I
regulations.
thought, but I just saying something to help the neighbors. If they have problems with looking at the lights at night. If we put some kind of trees in there that would help reduce the glow there, I think it would be more attractive for everyone.
Mr. Chairman, as you know, I aim to please.
Me too.
And I know that sometimes, no matter what you do, you can't please everyone, and I think that's a reality as well too. All I could say at this time is I would be willing to look at that issue with my client in select locations. And I'd have to work with our landscape architect on that point. That's all. That's what I can commit to you today.
That's all I'm asking for. I would like to, if possible, I think it'd be nice to have some more vegetation.
I'd be happy to I would endeavor to try to do that if at all possible.
Well, one suggestion that I would have, if you're going to not use some trees on the east, because you're going to be utilizing some of Mr. Santos's, couldn't you use some of those designated trees from the plan to put on the north side?
Oh, yeah, it's not, to be honest with you, Mr. Philbrick, it's not necessarily an issue of cost. It's just an issue of practicality. I mean, we literally have, if you look here, if you look at the width of what these spaces are, we're talking, I could probably lay between these two areas right here. And I just want to make sure that when you do that, when you have such a narrow band, you want to make sure that you pick species that are hardy and their root systems won't infiltrate under your parking lots. If
you put something like a London plane, which they put along sidewalks, it would do quite well.
I certainly know my limitations, and I would defer to a landscape architect like Brian Kent on that. And you probably know way more about trees than I do, Mr. Rathman. So, but yes, I absolutely would be willing to work with my client to explore that, because we do, despite what may be put in the paper once in a while, we do care very much about our neighbors.
I know,
and we want to be a good corporate citizen.
The other thing on the trees to the east of Mr. Santos' property.
Yes.
I hope they don't get too big, block out all the sunlight from the west to his property.
So the primary tree is the one right on the property line.
Yeah.
which is the it's the green giant arborvitaes, which grow.
Yeah.
They're going to be planted at 5 to 6 feet, and then
But-
they do grow up. They will go up to 10, 11, 12 feet over several years. One of the nice things about them is they grow quickly, and they make a really good, block. But, one of the things Mr. Santos has said is he likes the landscaping that's on that area right now. And if you were to modify or stipulate our application, I would please ask you to give us a little bit of flexibility on that, because I don't know if you got it in your packets or not, but and Mr. Santos might be able to talk about this in the public comment. There are certain plantings along the property line right now that don't look so good to me. And again, I'm not a tree expert, but they look like they should be replaced. And what I don't want to happen, and again, I'm looking out for my client, is I don't want to happen is we leave them, we put the fence in, and 3 years from now, either Mr. Santos or somebody else down the line in the chain of title comes back to this commission and says, look at these awful landscaping along the property line. This doesn't meet your requirements. No. And it's because, well, that's not what we wanted to plant. We think this planting plan is great. Again, we're willing to work with him, but I just think if we can leave somebody like Keith involved in determining what can be saved and what can't, I think that would be one way of solving the issue.
We need a little more variety in there. That's my opinion. But
well, I think what would happen is if this fence right here would move, I don't know, 3 or 4 feet this way, and the existing vegetation would stay outside the fence. Yeah. That's what Mr. Santos wants. And again, as long as the vegetation isn't dead, I mean, it's going to make it tough for us because we have to maintain it, and now we're going to have this narrow strip.
Well, you could move the fence and put some new planting inside the fence, both sides of the fence.
Oh, I think that's what we would do. I mean, we would keep the junipers and stuff as is, or shift them slightly. But then instead of the giant green arborvitae, we could try to keep what we could along the property line, that the plantings that he likes.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions at this time? Anyone else like to speak in favor of this application?
And don't forget to unmute yourself if you are looking to speak.
Hi, I'm looking to speak in favor. Is this the time?
Yes.
Okay, hi, Steve Cohen, 4 Fallon Road, Pawcatuck, and former member of the Police Commission. I joined the Police Commission in supporting this application. The applicant's proposal addresses a very long-standing need in downtown Mystic for additional off-street parking. That's really significant. While this property is separate and distinct from other properties in Mystic that are owned by the same group, the fact is the owners and the Heidenreich family have been tremendously supportive of the community. And the work that they have done in renovating the Whalers Inn and the work that they have done with the Shipwright's Daughter and other properties that they own is really a positive addition to this community. Less than 10 years ago, we should remember that there was broad-based concern about the deterioration of downtown Mystic, and in fact, deterioration of the region as a whole as a destination. And the restoration of Whalers Inn and other properties is far more attractive than the possibility, which was very real at one time, of empty storefronts, limited dining, outdated lodging. The ownership and management of Whalers Inn and the related properties have invested in Mystic in a holistic way. This is not unlike what has occurred in Westerly, which is a very positive development. I think we can all look to Westerly as an example of positive, smart development in the downtown area that has revitalized Westerly as a destination. In the case of Westerly, the Ocean House was the impetus for a lot of investment. And the ownership of the Ocean House, like the Heidenreich family, has taken a keen interest in assuring that the well-being of the entire community. That's what this family is doing in Mystic, the Heidenreich family, and we should be grateful for that, but also recognize how important that is to the future of everybody's future here in Mystic. So this is a family, I just want to note, the Heidenreich family has been extraordinarily supportive of civic groups, sponsoring various nonprofit organizations in the community. These are people who care and who see a future for Mystic, and that's their interest here. So the parcel that we're discussing could easily be proposed for new development. And that new development could be accompanied by a request for a waiver of parking. Instead, the proposal is to use the parcel to improve parking as a long-term investment in Mystic. That's for the betterment of certainly the Oddfellows building, but it's also for the betterment of downtown Mystic. It addresses this long-term problem of parking, and we should be appreciative of that. It's a very thoughtful, long-term approach to improving the quality of life and the value of the entire downtown area. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak in favor?
I would like to speak in favor if the time is appropriate.
Yes, it is.
My name is Michael McHugh. I'm a resident of the area and also an employee in downtown Mystic. I would like to speak in favor of the project. I have to drive and park in downtown, 5-6 days a week. We all know the struggles with just influx in tourism and the stress it can cause as an employee in the area. And I would like to say that I commend the effort to increase parking for the surrounding buildings, take some of the traffic from the on-street parking, and make each one of our lives a little bit easier in the day-to-day with some increased parking. I've also seen all the effort on a first-hand basis that the hotel and the affiliated restaurants and businesses go through to try to improve the community, and I feel it in a personal way. So I would just like to speak in favor.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Hi, I would like to speak in favor.
Yes, go right ahead.
Is that okay?
Your name,
I
please?
just wanted, my name is Kathleen. I live in Pawcatuck, and I go to Mystic all the time. I think parking is a desperate situation. I think getting people off the street who, like, for example, the tenants who live there is a tremendous effort of the people who own the Whalers. I think that's commendable. Making that use accessible for the people who live there so that there can be a little relief in the downtown area. I know I have kids, and going further and further and further away is actually dangerous for where I need to go. So getting those people off the street parking and into their proper spaces is incredibly important, and I think a huge necessity. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I'd like to speak.
In favor?
In favor.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Bruce Flax. I'm representing the Greater Mystic Chamber. I'm in support of the proposed site plan application for additional parking to service the property and business at 11 Cottrell Street. The Greater Mystic Chamber of Commerce represents the businesses and community in the Mystic area. In studying the proposed plan, we feel the aesthetics of the area were taken into consideration. The zoning calls for a 25-foot buffer. According to the plan, will be thoughtfully landscaped. I've been involved in an ongoing parking study committee undertaken cooperatively by Groton and Stonington, and one of the themes from the consultant with regards to parking is utilizing underutilized space. I'm asking the Planning and Zoning Commission to please support the area management review application for the construction of 15 paved parking spaces adjacent to and serving the retail and residential uses at 11 Cottrell Street. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, I'd like to make a comment. Thank you, first of all, for reviewing this for us, and thank you, Bill, for your articulate description of our plan and what we're trying to do here. I actually have a letter from Suzette Tebus, dated April 6th, that she has requested that I read into the minutes for tonight. My name is Suzette Tebus. I live at 322 Montauk Ave and operate Simply Majestic Jewelers in Stonington. Having grown up in Mystic, owned and operated my own business, and served our community for many years, I, like you, am concerned for the health and safety and well-being of our community, its residents and businesses, as well as the visitors to our wonderful town. Land use and the fair and equitable execution of our regulations is a key part to ensuring our future is as bright as our past. With this in mind, I would like to share my thoughts on PZ 210-1 SPA and CAM Whalers Inn RE LLC. I have reviewed the application and find it consistent with the regulations. Specifically, combining the properties in question is permitted under Section 2.2 of the zoning regs. The property must comply with both the DB5 and the RH10 regarded parking. Since 15 spaces is less than the 20 spaces permitted in each of these zones, the application is in compliance. Further, the buffer requirements have been met. The landscaping plan is generous and will enhance the neighborhood while making every effort to screen. The drainage and other engineering are also in compliance. Finally, the safety from a traffic issue, near and dear to my heart, has been reviewed by the police commission and they have no concerns. Finally, we can't have a land use discussion in Mystic Stonington without discussing parking. No matter how you twist and turn, 15 off-street parking places is an improvement to everyone who uses or lives in this area. I personally know the ownership and the management team involved in this application. They develop and operate top quality facilities and are an asset to our community in so many ways we do not have time to list them here. Finally, under a more general topic, it is essential that we create quality land use regulations and then assure if a landowner complies, they have the confidence they will be approved. If they do not comply, the public should be confident that it will not be approved. Often this is a difficult and complicated task with gray areas emerging, even though every effort is made to avoid them when we write and adopt our regulations. This is not one of those times. All capitals, emphasis. The application clearly complies with the regulations. They are endeavoring to improve their stake in our community while making access to their property safer and more pleasant for everyone involved. Good land use creates a predictable, usable, progressive community. Overreaching and over-strict regulations do not preserve what used to be. They help create blighted properties by making reinvestment in them impossible as the needs of the community changes over the years. Please do not delay a swift approval of this application. Thank you, Suzette.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak in favor?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, my name is Josette Schultz. I'm a resident and property owner in Stonington. And I just wanted to speak, in favor of the Whalers Inn Corporation in general. I frequent the restaurant at the Whalers Inn, and I know that's not the property that's in question here, but, they're, a related business. And I just have to say that I'm so impressed with what they've done in, renovating the Whalers Inn and that restaurant and the high degree of cuisine that they're offering. And what's really so significant to me is the way they support the community in their efforts to locally source everything. I mean, what they're doing is just radiating, like economic health to, just a broader community by supporting local farmers and the local fishermen and, suppliers. And I think it's just, it's just such a nice business. And, from the influx of people moving into Connecticut, like from New York City and Boston, possibly as a result of the pandemic, they're going to be looking for really, that quality, that Manhattan quality of cuisine. And, they're also going to be looking to vacation in Connecticut, and not so much going, elsewhere. And we want Mystic to become more of a destination for them. And, this type of business it is something that really, I think will attract them and just bring more, more, more business, tourist business to the region in general.
Thank
and
you.
make Mystic more of a destination.
Thank you. Anyone else? Is anyone else like to speak in favor? Is anyone opposed to this application?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to speak.
Go right ahead.
Ben Tamsky, 5 Edgemont Street in Mystic. I am representing the Mystic River Park Commission at 28 Cottrell Street, Mystic, Connecticut. The following statement was agreed to by unanimous consent of the Mystic River Park Commission, including alternate members. Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, Mystic River Park was founded over 25 years ago as a way of preserving a large portion of the downtown Mystic waterfront. While the primary goal was the creation of a park for passive recreation, the secondary goal was always historic preservation of the existing lumberyard buildings and the surrounding neighborhood. Elected by the residents of Mystic Fire District, the Mystic River Park Commission is compelled to take up the role as a voice for the residents of the downtown Mystic neighborhood in which the park resides. Many of our members live in the immediate area and experience the direct results of the issues that we address. In 2007, we completed the restoration of the Mallory Homestead building at a cost exceeding $1.1 million because the voters that enabled the creation of the park 10 years earlier saw the value in the preservation of even a small part of this local history. The homestead today has 3 individual apartments, the rent from which helps to support the maintenance of the park. We restored other buildings that made up the core of the lumber business that are also now leased to offset operational costs for the park. One of the buildings was retrofitted to accommodate public restrooms, a much needed asset to the town. It is because of our mission to preserve our properties, which make up over 75% of those fronting on Cottrell Street, that we take an interest in the application before you tonight. It is our belief that demolition of residential structures for the construction of additional parking to accommodate a commercial use is not an allowed or appropriate use in this residential zone. Section 2.2 of the zoning regulations, which addresses lots divided by district boundaries, states only uses allowed in the respective zones shall be permitted in those respective portions of the lot. The table in section 5.1.2 shows parking less than 20 cars as an allowable accessory use in the RH10 zoning district. When determining the applicability of the accessory use, we must look at the primary use. Since the primary use in this case is retail and residential, one of which is not an allowable use in the RH10 zone, the accessory use cannot be allowed either. The approval of this application would cause an encroachment of the DB5 zone into the RH10 residential neighborhood. Really, in effect, it would amount to a change of the zoning map. The zoning map can only be changed through a zoning map amendment. It is our understanding that this is the main reason that the ability of the ZBA to grant use variances was revoked. Only your commission can change the map. If the applicant's more liberal interpretation of the regulations is adopted, it will set a very unfortunate precedent for residential districts throughout the town. It is for this reason that we oppose this application. Signed, Ben Tamsky, Chairman, Mr. River Park Commission. Thank you. And I would like to, if I could, you indulge me to speak on my own behalf briefly. To answer, Suzette Tribus said this is, there are gray areas in zoning and it's your job to interpret them, and she emphatically states that this is not one of those times. I would say this is definitely one of those times when it's a gray area, and I know that the statement that I just read from the Park Commission disagrees with the applicant and your own staff on this matter. But I would like to point out that there are 2 sides to it, and perhaps sometimes a higher power like a Superior Court judge is perhaps the appropriate arbiter. There's been a lot of talk about the Whalers Inn tonight from those speaking in favor of this application, although supposedly it doesn't have anything to do with Whalers Inn. Which brings up the question of if this is approved, uh, I wonder how it will be enforced that the use of the parking lot by supposedly the residents and patrons of the Oddfellows building. The applicant spoke of how they would obviously have to police it and enforce it, but I'm more concerned about how the town would enforce this approval for use by that property and not as additional parking for the Whalers Inn or future restaurant or whatever. And I wonder, and that which brings up the question of they state that there's a grandfathered lack of parking for the Oddfellows building now of 17, a deficit of 17 spaces. And I wonder if the approval of this specifically for that use would make at least 14 of that 17 deficit moot for future applications. I would hope that it would, since that's the stated use. So again, I think it really is a question of conformance with the zoning regulations. I think that because this is allowed as an accessory use on the RH10 portion, that it has to be accessory to an allowed use in the RH10. Otherwise, it's a de facto zone change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. Anyone else like to speak in opposition?
Yes. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah. Go right ahead.
Hi, my name is Jim Santos. I'm the abutting owner that I've gotten a lot of airtime tonight. Thank you very much. I would like to discuss the landscaping. That's really my biggest concern. It's the actual buffer. There was some discussion or some talk from one of the commissioners about diagonal parking. If you noticed on the site plan, all the cars are perpendicular parked in from the drive aisle, which face directly towards my property, and the house is about 5 feet from the property line. And so obviously, being that the headlights will be shining right through, it's a very large concern of mine. As far as what and where the buffer is actually going to be. I did send some photos and they didn't come out that well. I don't know if the commission had a chance to see them, but of what's existing there right now. And Mr. Sweeney did mention correctly that some of them don't look that good right now, presently. But actually, when the leaves go on them, there are some evergreens that are in very good health, and the ones that drop the leaves, I actually trim them every year. So they do act as a very good buffer in the actual summertime. But more importantly, because of where the fence line is proposed, which is going to be right on the property line, and some of that landscaping is actually on my property, but the majority of it is just straddling or over onto the Whalers Inn property. And if we take all that down, because that's what you'd have to remove all of it to put the fence there, you know what I mean? That's where my biggest concern is, and it's twofold. One, locating the fence 25 feet away from the parking lights, the parking spaces where the lights will be. The farther you move a fence away, the less effective it's going to be. The light trajectory is going to go over it. So one of my reasons is by moving it in more. And the only reason I used 8 feet in my letter to the commission was because, and I believe this is correct, but I believe that the original proposal on Haley Street had the fence on the property line as well. And due to a comment from the city, they moved it back 8 feet and put landscaping on either side. They didn't give me that luxury on my property line. They left the fence on the line, which would eliminate that. And then although I must say, they put a substantial amount of landscaping in, but the benefit of it won't come unless it's positioned correctly, is my opinion. And anyhow, there's a number of regulations in the code that specifically talk about site design, making every effort to preserve as much native vegetation as possible. Another one that states parking areas are to be designed to preserve as much native vegetation as possible. And again, my whole reasoning is to try to create that buffer of both potential trash and the car lights, especially with Mr. Sweeney's comment on in the evening, if people use it for Bravo parking, they're going to be leaving there at 12 o'clock at midnight and such, and they'll be starting their cars and their headlights will be coming on. So the fence relocation will help in both cutting down on some of those headlights, bleeding over onto the residential property, as well as allow to keep some of that existing buffer that's there today, that's mature and able to immediately block some of the light bleed. So I asked if this plan is approved, and I would be happy to sit down with Mr. Sweeney and the Whalers Inn, and they have been. I will give credit to them. They've already done things that I've asked and talked to them about, and they've been very responsive in some of the ways. Originally, the drainage was going to be right on the property line, which would have filled my basement. So I want to thank them publicly for moving it away from their residential buildings, because it would have filled the neighbors up as well. But it certainly would have filled my basement up. And so that was taken care of. So I'd be more than willing to sit down and work with them. But I would ask that they mimic the front landscaping along the side as well, giving me that the better light trajectory or deflecting of the light trajectory, as well as leaving some of these larger and extremely healthy evergreen bushes. The need for parking, I couldn't agree more, is needed in the borough of Mystic. But one thing this is going to take away, one point I'd like to make, is that the curb cuts, there's only a handful of parks out in the street now. The curb cuts alone are going to remove some of those parking spaces. But again, my point is not that. My point is trying to work something out so that I'll be at least the least impacted. My neighbors will be the least impacted, and the Whalers Inn can get what they can get by moving the fence and the landscaping over towards the parking lot. It should be no hardship on the Whalers Inn. I do agree you need a snow somewhere to put the snow, but you certainly don't need 15 to 18 feet of it of grassed area for that. So I would ask that. As far as my other comment about the curbing, if this area, it actually drains extremely well, but during high tide it does, with the tides up, it does pond and then goes away quick. So during some of these heavy rainstorms, what happens is that the parking lots overflow. That was my only reason for putting the curbing up, because during that time where we get a extremely heavy downflow of water, if the parking lot isn't completely curved in, it potentially will run towards my property and again into the basement. And again, all I want to do is try to minimize impact from whatever the commission actually approves here on the site. But I would like to emphasize, about the ordinance, the codes today, that they should be that they are requested to make every effort to preserve as much as possible. So if there's if Mr. Sweeney is going to have meetings on this, on the side, I would love to be part of them, and I'm sure we could come to an agreement that would both serve myself, my property and the Whalers Inn themselves.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak in opposition?
Could I just, one more thing I did
Sure.
want to say is one of the reasons I'm saying I ask for approval, or if it's approved, I would ask that you put a or a note in there that they would work with me on this, because like I said, they've already worked in a number of ways, and we were able to come to an agreement. But also the work that they do, I will say they do quality work there. So if they promise me something, I would expect from history that they would do a good job at it. So I would like to get that on the record.
Thank you. Anyone else opposed to this application? Any general comments on this application?
Mr. Chairman, Carlene Donnarummo here.
All right, go right ahead, Colleen.
Well, the commission had some concern of the north side of the property where they were talking about perhaps putting trees. If the trees don't work, my thought would be to put one of those fences there. The fences would block the headlights going into the units at Whalers Inn. That might be a possible solution to get some kind of a buffer, be it only a fence, at that property. So maybe they want to think about that too, if they can't get trees there on the north side. That's it.
Thank you, Colleen.
You're welcome.
Any other general comments?
Bill Shear for Haley Street.
Yes, Bill, go right ahead.
Yeah, I was trying to get into Stove, and I sent a letter to the commission. I'd like them to take a look at it. You can see how many different ways this use was described. And I think that the parking lot they're talking about is a residential parking lot, not a commercial parking lot. And as we look farther down in there, we looked at the lot divided. Use is only allowed in the respective zones shall be permitted in those respective portions of the lot. And if in fact they were having to go for a special use permit, which should be the same requirements as any place else, the commission may modify the parking regulations by special use permit in accordance with the following requirements, provided the activity is permitted in the underlying zoning district. So I think that the retail use is not allowed. It's confusing. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Bill. Anyone else like to comment on this application? Anyone else out there like to comment? Hearing none, we'll go back to the applicant for the rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief tonight. I want to thank the people who did come out to speak in favor of the application. I know it's always difficult it's always easier to come out to speak against something than for something. So I do appreciate it. So does my client. Just quickly on Mr. Tamsky's concerns on behalf of the Mystic River Park Commission, I would direct the commission to look at the use in RH10 and the specific language for accessory parking lots. And this sort of goes to Mr. Shear's comments as well. You can provide in the RH10 district as an accessory use to a permitted use on the same property. It doesn't say in the same zone. It doesn't say as long as the principal use is permitted in the underlying zoning district. The language is very clear. There's no room for interpretation. You can do a parking lot of less than 20 spaces, provide it to the principal use on the same property. By merging these properties, we have a split zone parcel, a parcel in two districts, which is acknowledged and there are specific rules for in section 2.2. Your staff has reviewed it as well and has come to the only reasonable interpretation of the regulation as it's currently written, that you can do this on this property and you can have a parking lot in the RH10 zone as long as the use serves a principal use on the same property. Doesn't have to be in the same zone, doesn't have to be permitted in the underlying RH10 zoning district. And I think that's very important. The regulations are clear that that's allowed. Remember, the retail and multifamily residential uses in the Oddfellows building are permitted uses in the DB5, which will be a portion of the unified parcel. In terms of Mr. Tamsky's individual comments, he's correct that it's very hard for the town, if not impossible, to effectively enforce or police the users of a specific use, and particularly a parking lot. There's no way that Candy Palmer can go around with a notebook and figure out who's parking where on a Saturday night. It just doesn't happen. Just like you can't go around and look in people's bedrooms to figure out who's sleeping there. That's outside the ability of zoning. There are some things that are left to property owners, and property owners have to police their properties. And that's what's going to happen here. I will agree with Mr. Tamsky. And so write it down, because I don't often agree with him, but I do agree with him by adding the parking spaces that we are proposing and combining the lots. Our non-conforming condition becomes less non-conforming. We go from 5 out of 17 to 14 out of 17. We can't go back the other way. So you heard in the previous application earlier tonight, Mr. Radwig do a really good job talking about the issue of abandonment of non-conforming uses. It's the same basic principle. By getting this approved, by building this parking lot, this entire Oddfellows property becomes less non-conforming. And you will not hear from me an argument anytime in the future that somehow that we get to count the 5 spaces. That's just not how it's going to work. Mr. Santos, certainly appreciate his comments. Couple things. As I said earlier in my presentation, we agreed to relocate the fence off the property line. We can do that if the commission wants. I understand his position on the situation. We think our design is superior, but again, we want to be a good neighbor, so we can pull that back. And what I would suggest, we need to pull that back and allow for some snow storage on our side of the fence and some plantings to make it look attractive. But I think that's something that can be easily done with review of staff. We have agreed to put curbing on the east side of the parking lot, even though, again, we don't think it's necessary from an engineering perspective. We're willing to do that as long as the town engineer doesn't have a problem. And in terms of the plantings along the property line, which, he has indicated that some of them might need to be replaced, I would leave it to a professional, somebody like a landscape architect, to be able to determine what's healthy and what can be saved. We're willing to try to work with him on that. On his final point, I like Mr. Santos has always been a gentleman with me and my client. I'm happy to meet with him. The commission cannot, as a matter of law, delegate its authority to a private citizen. So you can't say, well, we condition this plan as long as Mr. Santos is happy with the final design. You can't do that. That's just not a legal stipulation to a site plan approval. But he has my word, and I'm on the record tonight. I will meet with him. I'll show him our plans. At the end of the day, I'd like it to, I think the most appropriate thing is to have somebody like Keith Brines actually look at it, make sure that that it makes sense, that it's fair to all sides. And again, I'm committed to trying to work out the issue with Mr. Santos. He's always been a reasonable guy, and he's always lived up to his end of the bargain as well. And then finally, Colleen spoke about the possibility of a fence between the properties. I don't think that is the issue that Mr. Scheer has with the Whalers Inn. I think it's noise. I think it's lights that are higher up that illuminate the parking lot. If we can put something there, I think a tree would be the more appropriate thing. And again, I would suggest that we can explore that. I don't want to commit to that. It's certainly not required by the regulations, but we would be willing to explore that as a post-approval item. And finally, Mr. Scheer is correct. If the regulations said that the principal use of a property must be a permitted use in the underlying zoning district, then you couldn't do what we're proposing, but that's not what the regulation says. This commission could decide in the future to change your regulations. I certainly hope you don't. But you have to work with the regulations as they're written today. And the regulations as they're written today make it crystal clear that we can build a parking lot less than 20 spaces on the RH10 property, portion of the property that serves the principal use, which is located in the DB5 of the retail residential mixed use. So with that, that's all I have to say. Again, I thank you, the commission, for their time and attention this evening. And certainly we hope that you would move the application forward to approval. I'd remind you again that this is both a site plan application and a CAM review. So you need to make you need to include that in your motion or make a separate motion on the CAM issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any commission members have any further questions at this time?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Would it be worth making the apron, the easternmost curb cut, out of some sort of porous material rather than paving that? Meaning like how you see like fire engines come in sometimes with the cement squares with grass in between. Would that help reduce the sheeting onto Haley Street?
A couple issues. That's a very small area first, but also your Public Works Department and your town engineer promulgates design standards for all roadway aprons. And so we had to actually modify our apron. If you look at the town engineer's comments, we had to change our handicap ramps and our aprons to fit those standards. So again, that's sort of a drop in the bucket. I don't think there's any evidence in the drainage report or in the town engineer's review or in the DEP's review that there's anything lacking or unsuitable or inadequate about the drainage. In fact, the fact that we're able to take the drainage and put it underground and infiltrate it with a modern infiltration system with an isolator row, which I think is really important. Sometimes you'll see developments, not in Stonington because you guys have good engineering, but some of the outlying towns, you'll see people put infiltrators in that don't have isolation rows. And so you can get stuff put into, they clog up, they can't be repaired, they can't be maintained. This is a properly designed system, and your town engineer has gone through it with a fine-tooth comb. We actually made modifications based on some of his ideas and thoughts on it. So I'm very confident, and I think your town engineer is that it's more than suitable.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
No further questions, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you. Keith? It's your turn.
So as was mentioned, we sent this application out to various departments and agencies to review. And being a CAM application, we did send it to DEP's Office of Long Island Sound Programs. They really didn't have any concerns, except they wanted more detail about the ENS controls, which were provided on the revised plans. The revised plans were modified to meet the town engineer's review. I don't have comments back from the town engineer about the revised plans. So if this were to be approved, one of the stipulations would be that the final plans meet his review. I'm just going to go read the recommended stipulations that were in the staff report, just so everyone's on the same page with it. Number one is that prior to the issuance of a zoning permit, final plans shall be signed by the commission and recorded. Number two, final plans shall be reviewed to the satisfaction of the town engineer. Number three, final plan shall depict zoning district boundaries. It looks like that might be on the plan, but I just wanted to clarify where on the property the zoning district is. Number four, landscaping plan shall depict layout and dimensions shown on the site plan. Number five, and this is the long one, the applicant's design engineer of record shall provide inspection services and certified to the construction of the stormwater management system to ensure compliance with design specifications. Certifications shall include but not be limited to system bottom inspection, material specifications, and testing and system installation prior to backfill. In addition to inspection services, as-built conditions of the drainage system shall also be provided to the Department of Planning prior to the issuance of a certificate of zoning compliance. Basically, in summary, they have to certify that the drainage system works and is installed correctly. Number 6 is the standard language for an erosion and sedimentation control bond to make sure those measures are in place during construction. What I read does not include some of the potential stipulations that were talked about, like possibility of a tree or trees on the northern side to block the lights of Whalers Inn. Working to possibly keep the existing plants along 5 Haley Street if possible. Moving the fence in from 5 Haley to better block the headlights, and curbing along the eastern side of the property, pending the town engineer's review of that feature. Just want to clarify too, of course, this doesn't involve any changes to the Oddfellows building. Any changes to the use of that building would have to come back before this commission. Let's see, we talked about some of the other things here. As Mr. Sweeney mentioned, this would be for a site plan application and the CAM application also. And I think that's the extent of my comments here.
Chuck, you still on? Guess not.
I am, Mr. Chairman.
Do you have any questions at this time before we close the public hearing? Any comments?
Just one comment, and it's only a suggestion. It doesn't have to go in the application, but this parking lot appears to be in the 100-year flood zone. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So if it is, and it appears to be a very well designed leaching system with in the right soils with adequate storage, but it would be destroyed literally if it were inundated by floodwaters with sediments and all kinds of issue that would be in the floodwaters. And my recommendation is that the designer and the owner consider simple gate valves that could easily be installed in it, so that in the event of a forecast flood, the system could be shut down as the floodwaters come up and reopened as the floodwaters recede. Very inexpensive, and would save them the difficulty of digging this system up in the future, because you can't remove the sediment once it gets into these infiltration structures. So just a suggestion, and it doesn't have to be a condition of approval.
Thank you, Chuck.
Do that.
It's a good one. Do I hear a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Do I hear a proposal? Excuse me. Start all again. Do I hear a motion on this application?
I'll make a motion to approve the CAM portion of this application.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Do I hear a motion on the application itself?
Motion to approve.
Go ahead, Fred.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
With the stipulations?
Yes.
You want to add Chuck's
Chuck's was a suggestion.
suggestion? We can add it. We don't have to.
Nope. Sounds like it'd be in the applicant's best interest, though.
Yeah. We can add that.
So my understanding is we have roughly 6 stipulations from Keith, And then the
Key.
other suggestions of the east curb, moving the fence, work with the Santos party on landscaping, working with them, not necessarily dictating,
Yeah.
exploring trees on the north side, and final engineer approval by the town with suggestion or stipulation of the check valves in place
And we have the bond.
and the bond.
The bond, yeah.
So we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
And the bond was a already a recommended stipulation.
One of the first 6 by the town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you give me 1 second, I'm trying to put all the proposed landscaping ones together in one thought.
While we're debating, we can say that the commission is going to look into how we can get a 90-day approval or application for demolition of structures in town.
Good.
I think we're going to put it on the next agenda. But to do that, we're going to need the public support because the public has to go to the town for an ordinance. We can suggest it, but we have to have has to be done by ordinance, not by zoning. So I think
That's a town vote, Mr. Chair?
it has to go to town meeting.
It's separate. That's separate from. I mean, we're about to embark on rewriting the regulations, but this is.
I don't think.
Something.
I'll have to ask Keith. I don't think we can put it in our regulations.
It's a separate ordinance.
It has to be a separate ordinance.
Okay.
And so we have to get the select women to get on board as well.
Well, all you have to listen. All you have to do is have us, because the farmers did this. All you have to do is have 25 signatures to request a town meeting. And they have to do it within 2 weeks.
Wow.
Have the town meeting. So.
Even in COVID times. All right.
Well, even in COVID times. I don't know, but anyway, it's not, the selectmen can go aboard it, but you can have a town meeting without selectmen's approval, but citizens requesting a town meeting.
Great. Okay.
Okay.
Are we ready, Keith?
All right, here's what I've got for what would be a stipulation number 7. Applicant shall explore modification of the landscaping plan to add trees along the north side, maintain existing landscaping along the east side, move fence in from
boundary line.
Haley Street, and add curbing along the east side of the lot pending town engineer review of this feature. Modifications shall be approved by staff.
So that's not a traditional stipulation in that it's a negotiating. It's a request to negotiate these things, but not an order to do them, right?
Right, and
so that's a little.
It's also having their landscape architect figure out if this could work.
Yeah. Okay.
And we're gonna put Chuck's thing in the Chuck valve.
I think that was a recommendation. But...
Well, it was his idea. All right, we don't have to put it in as stipulation then. All those in favor of the motion?
Oh, do we have an opportunity to discuss any further?
Yeah, sure. We can still.
Okay.
Further
Am I the only one who remembers the uproar about tearing down those buildings on Haley Street years ago? And the assurances that, oh my gosh, we certainly wouldn't put a parking lot there. And it seems to me that this is a little shell game here that we've now attached it to the Oddfellows building and we're going to put a parking lot in. It may be legal, but I don't like it.
I don't remember promises by the property owner.
One
Okay.
thing is that
I remember the
couple years ago,
brouhaha, but I don't remember
Before my time, and
I don't remember any promise.
Okay.
I
Might
know
be
there was a
me.
lot of discussion.
Okay.
At the time, I told them the time to plant grass. So they did plant grass, but I guess the grass is going.
And I had numerous conversations with Jason about the ordinance, and he didn't want to touch it at that time. So I think the time is right now. We should move ahead with an ordinance.
and regarding the parking lot, a couple years ago, the owners of the Whalers Inn actually went before the Architectural Design Review Board with a preliminary application for a parking lot here. And that was in conjunction with a planned new restaurant on the John's Cafe parcel, which they're not proposing now. But even back a couple of years ago, they were before that board with preliminary plans for a parking lot.
Okay. Must be my age. Okay.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't.
But I believe the argument was, and Attorney Sweeney could correct me, was they were two different parcels, so the parking lot couldn't be used for the Whalers Inn at that time. Or maybe it was John's.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember the layout there, but that parking lot was, I believe, intended to be for the John's Cafe.
Ah, okay.
And the Whalers Inn didn't own the Oddfellows building at that time.
That's what I meant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we have a motion on the floor. We have discussion on the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion. Ben?
Aye. Approve.
Fred?
Give me a minute. Move on.
Gardner? Gardner?
oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was.
You approve?
Muted.
Gardner is checked out.
Gardner?
All right, am I there?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you
All right,
approve the motion?
I'm in favor, yes.
Okay. Ryan?
I approve.
Okay. Now we're back to Fred.
Okay. I approve.
I approve. Application approved.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful night. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
We have any other further business tonight?
No, just in 6A, the bond reduction application for
Oh, yes.
predatory development. That's just we tabled until the next meeting.
That's it.
Make a motion to close the meeting. Adjourn.
So the next meeting will be wait a minute. Next meeting's on the 20th.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
The last meeting in June it will not be on a Tuesday night. We'll have to reschedule it because Keith's daughter's graduating from high school. So we have to give him the night off.
First things first.
Yeah.
I know. I thought we came first, but it didn't work.
No.
They thought it would be a good idea to have a graduation on a Tuesday night. So
Congratulations, Keith.
Yeah, congratulations.
thanks.
Now comes college, Keith. You ready?
Right.
You'll have two in college.
Yeah. Yep. Yes, he's actually the youngest.
Well, that's
Do I
good.
hear a motion to adjourn?
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
And be sure to say good night to Gail because she's listening in all the time.
Good night, Gail.
Good night, Gail.
Good night, Gail.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, Gail.
Motion adjourned. Meeting adjourned.
Thank
Good
you.
night, everybody.
Night.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.